Mr. President.
Senator from Hawaii.
Mr. President, our distinguished Republican whip referred to negotiations that occurred regarding welfare reform, tax reform, education reform, the No Child Left Behind. And these negotiations occurred, yes, but they certainly occurred not in the context of a threat of a government shutdown or the threat of government defaulting on our obligations. Very big difference, the context in which these negotiations occurred. That is not what we have before us today. Mr. President, this past Saturday, I came to the floor to share some thoughts on the impact of this government shutdown on Hawaii's federal employees. And in those remarks, I tried to remind my colleagues that we have to think beyond the most recent news cycle. Shutting down government hurts the American people's confidence in our institutions. It drives people away from public service, and it undermines our national security and our economy. If we are going to live up to the legacy of our nation as the world's indispensable nation, we have to rise above zero-sum politics. We have to show our allies and our adversaries that our political processes can withstand grave disagreements. Our process is intended to allow for vigorous debate, but to ultimately find common ground. Over 6 months ago, the Senate passed a budget. So did the House. A little over 6 days ago, the U.S. government shut down. How did this happen? The reason is that Republicans have blocked now 21 attempts to negotiate a federal budget agreement in a timely fashion. That is how negotiations are supposed to happen, not with the threat of a government shutdown, not with the threat of defaulting on our obligation and debt. So instead, after 6 months of failing to come to the table, Tea Party Republicans are holding the U.S. government, and if we default on our debts, the world economy hostage. Enough is enough. The Senate is prepared to negotiate on fiscal issues. The President is ready to negotiate on fiscal issues. We can find a path forward so we can all agree on the path. But first, Congress needs to do its job. It needs to reopen the government and make sure that the United States pays its bills. These are fundamental responsibilities. Just to be clear, defaulting on our debt would be the most irresponsible action I can imagine. It is the most easily avoidable catastrophe in history. We are not talking about a natural disaster. We're talking about a totally avoidable catastrophe. Yet, some Republicans in the House believe that default would not be a big deal. In fact, one member of the House actually said that a default would, quote, bring stability to world markets, end quote. That is an opinion that no one outside of the Tea Party bubble agrees with. In fact, economists, small businesses, bankers, big businesses, realtors, and nearly everyone in between has been clear. Default would be a catastrophe for our economy. Not just our economy either. Our currency, our bonds, and the full faith and credit that they are backed by are the linchpin of the global economy. How a default from the world's most trusted nation could possibly bring stability to world markets is incomprehensible. We have to stop the ideological games and irresponsible rhetoric. Then we can negotiate on fiscal issues and other policies, mindful of the work we were elected to do and mindful of the people, families, and communities that elected us to serve them. Today, I'd like to share some more stories from Hawaii families and businesses about how the government shutdown is impacting one of the key drivers of Hawaii's economy, tourism. Each year, millions of people from all over the world flock to Hawaii. Our state has so much to offer. They come to enjoy our blue oceans and sandy beaches. They come to visit our breathtaking national parks and wildlife refuges. They also come to learn and pay respect at our historical attractions like Pearl Harbor. Last year, Hawaii welcomed over 8 million visitors, a record number. Combined, these visitors spent $42 million per day. $5 million of this supports state and local government activities that benefit our communities. In 2012, about 20% of our state's gross domestic product was generated by tourism. That economic activity supports 175,000 jobs in Hawaii. Due to our location in the center of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii's tourism industry relies on critical government services to keep people moving and commerce flowing. These include the work done by our air traffic controllers, our customs and TSA personnel, and agricultural inspectors. And many of these workers are on the job, but they're not getting paid right now. Thanks to them, our transportation systems are operating safely and effectively. As a result, visitors are still flocking to our resorts, our beaches, and other attractions. Even with the Tea Party shutdown, 2013 is on track to be another strong year for tourism in Hawaii. Unfortunately, at the same time, there are small businesses around the state that are being impacted by the shutdown. For the last 7 days, our national parks, wildlife refuges, and historical sites have been closed to the public. These federal sites are critical to many small businesses, particularly in our rural communities. Over the past week, I've heard from many people, especially small business owners, whose livelihoods are being impacted by the closure of these federal sites. One tour operator wrote to me, "Our business is losing money, as do our tour guides who cannot perform the tours to the national parks. We have to return the money to a lot of our clients because their tours have to be canceled. Our tour guides are losing income as well, as they will not be able to do the tours. National parks are some of the main attractions in Hawaii. People travel thousands of miles from all parts of the world, spend a lot of money to come and visit, and then the main things that attract them are closed, and they are not able to see them. For a lot of people, these trips are once in a lifetime, and if they don't see them now, they will never be able to see them again." A restaurant owner from Hawaii Island wrote, "Well, we are in a small town on the Big Island of Hawaii. Our economy is totally tourist-driven. We are dependent on people going to the national park and stopping at our place to eat. Since the shutdown, our revenue has dropped a lot, and we have had to cut hours for employees to compensate for the lack of business. I'm tired of all this Republican childish actions and wish all politicians would drop the partisan nonsense and do what is right for the American people. Thank you for your concern." One gentleman from Maui reminded me that private businesses don't get to pause on meeting their commitments when the government is closed. He wrote, "My daughter and son-in-law have a tourist-based clientele for their bicycle crater tour business on Maui. When Haleakala National Park was closed down, they lost their income and are still having to pay office expenses, etc., as well as their home expenses, but nothing is coming in and everything is going out. They are losing hundreds to thousands of dollars a day. Their employees who have families aren't able to work with the business closed. Tourists who come to Maui to have a good time, part of which was to bike down from Haleakala, are angry and disappointed. And some even think that this is somehow Maui government's fault." He goes on to say, "My daughter has 6 children, mortgage payments, money is going out, none is coming in. My family are diligent middle-class people who work hard, pay their taxes, vote in every election, responsible citizens who do their part always. If this ridiculous federal government shutdown continues for any length of time, my family will lose their business and be at the poverty level in no time, as will all their employees. Everyone I know on either side of the political spectrum think this shutdown is ridiculous and unnecessary." Mr. President, I've also heard about the impact of the shutdown on visitors themselves who come to Hawaii. One person from Hawaii whose family members have traveled to Hawaii to visit wrote, "My family has traveled 6,000 miles on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Sorry, no Pearl Harbor. Dad was a lifer Navy man. Sorry, no Volcanoes National Park. No Pu'ukohola." These sites are essential to our culture and tourism alike. Many are without work. It is just ridiculous over a law that has been declared constitutional. Their antics change nothing, just hurt our country. Mr. President, another local bed and breakfast owner on the Big Island shared the perspective of some of her international guests. "Aloha. I have a bed and breakfast in Hilo, and I feel sorry for my guests who have saved for a once-in-a-lifetime vacation to Hawaii. They have come from all over the world to see our beautiful Volcano National Park. These guests do not understand how the government can close and deny them access to the park. This week, I have guests from Montreal, Canada, Singapore, Germany, France, and Japan. They may never have the opportunity to visit here again. This is shameful for our country. Not only is this behavior bad for our country, but bad for the world." Mr. President, the Tea Party shutdown is also impacting Hawaii visitors to our nation's capital. Yesterday, I met with 81 students from Mililani Middle School on Oahu. They've made the long trip from Hawaii to Washington, D.C. in hopes of seeing historical sites, visiting museums, and learning about their country and our democracy. The trip was saved for and planned for months in advance. The sites and museums were scheduled. Their tickets and reservations were already paid for. They couldn't rebook their travel, even though the shutdown has closed many of the sites they planned to visit. I took them on a tour of the Capitol myself because it was the only way they could see these halls of government. These students are here to learn about our democracy. Many of them asked me about the shutdown and how we were going to get government back on track. What kind of message will they take home with them about how our government operates? These are just some of the stories that illustrate the real impact of the Tea Party shutdown on communities, families, and people in Hawaii. So many of the folks whose letters I've shared work hard to earn an honest living. They go to work each day, striving to show our visitors aloha while building something for themselves and their families to be proud of. They play by the rules, meet their commitments, and do what they can to be good community members. Yet, through no fault of their own, many of these Hawaii small businesses are losing income and their livelihoods are being affected. It's past time for the House to take the responsible action to pass the Senate bill to keep government running and services going. It's not fair to our veterans, our students, and their families when they can't visit our nation's historical and natural treasures just because a small minority in Congress has chosen recklessness over responsibility. And it's not fair that this shutdown and senseless default threats have gone on for weeks, for a week. This behavior is harming our economy, undermining our credibility around the world. We need to stop the Tea Party temper tantrum. We need to open the government. We need to pay our bills. Then we can negotiate on other matters. I yield the floor.